Donald Trump has pledged to bring more water to drought-stricken California from Canada. While his promise isn't exactly a plan, he did sort of suggest water from British Columbia could just be diverted through Oregon and into the Golden State.
British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty.
Millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
It began with a promise that sounded almost impossible, a promise to bring water to a land that's drying up faster than ever. Standing before a cheering crowd in Fresno, former President Donald Trump declared that he would turn the faucet back on for California. But this time, his solution wasn't about dams or local reforms. He was looking north, toward Canada. Trump claimed that millions of gallons of fresh water flow freely from Canadian mountains into the sea. Water that could instead be redirected to America's drought-stricken states. He described it as a matter of common sense, of neighborly cooperation. Yet what he was really suggesting was something no American leader has seriously proposed before, tapping into Canada's water supply. The idea immediately lit up headlines on both sides of the border. Trump hinted that Canada, blessed with abundant lakes and glaciers, had more than enough to share. But Canadians didn't see it that way. The response from Ottawa was swift and cold. "Canada's water is not for sale," said Mark Carney, the country's former central banker and one of its most respected economic voices. Not now, not ever. And with that, a new kind of tension began to take shape between Washington and Ottawa, one not about oil, tariffs, or defense spending, but something far more fundamental: water. At first glance, it might sound like a political stunt, but behind Trump's words lies a harsh truth. The American West is running dry. From California's Central Valley to Arizona's desert towns, reservoirs are shrinking, farms are failing, and entire ecosystems are on the brink of collapse. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, two of the nation's largest water bodies, have dropped to record lows. In Nevada, the Hoover Dam's turbines are barely spinning at half their capacity. Meanwhile, population growth and agricultural demand continue to surge. Scientists have been warning for decades that the combination of climate change, urban expansion, and poor water management could lead to a permanent crisis. That warning has arrived. So when Trump talks about Canadian water, he's not just being provocative. He's giving voice to a fear that has quietly been growing in Washington, that the United States, a nation that once tamed rivers and built empires on its natural resources, might soon not have enough of its most basic one. Canada, by contrast, sits atop 1/5 of the world's freshwater supply. From the Great Lakes to the glacial rivers of British Columbia, water defines the Canadian landscape. For decades, environmentalists have argued that this makes Canada the Saudi Arabia of water, a resource superpower in an age of scarcity. But that label also comes with a danger. Carney and others in Canada's leadership class know that once water becomes a tradable commodity, it's almost impossible to control. They've seen what happens when resources are commodified. Corporations and foreign investors move in, governments lose leverage, and ecosystems suffer. Canada has already fought those battles over oil, timber, and minerals. Water, however, is different. It's life itself. That's why Carney's rejection wasn't just about politics. It was about sovereignty. "The moment we start exporting our water," he said in a later interview, "we surrender a piece of our independence." In the U.S., however, Trump's proposal was met with applause by some farming groups and industry lobbyists who have long pushed for water imports from Canada or Alaska. Quietly, feasibility studies have circulated in policy circles for years, mapping potential pipeline routes that could transport billions of gallons southward. Some of these plans would stretch hundreds of miles, cutting through forests, farmlands, and protected areas, an engineering feat on the scale of the oil pipelines that already divide North America. To Trump's supporters, such projects are a symbol of American strength and ingenuity, a bold answer to a growing threat. To Canadians, they look like a threat themselves, the first step toward draining their most sacred resource. But beyond the political drama, there's an uncomfortable reality both sides must face. Water scarcity isn't a temporary problem. The past 5 years have been among the hottest ever recorded. Glaciers are melting faster than predicted, and the snowpacks that feed rivers like the Colorado and Columbia are shrinking. As the American West bakes under prolonged heat waves, entire cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles are staring at a future where growth may no longer be sustainable. Trump, in his trademark style, framed the issue as a negotiation. "We buy their oil, we buy their lumber, we buy everything," he said at a rally. "Why not water? It just flows into the ocean. We can pay for it." But Trump's rhetoric reignited an old anxiety, that America's thirst might someday override diplomacy. And as his 2025 campaign gains momentum, the promise of turning the water back on has become one of his new rallying cries. For drought-ridden farmers in California and Arizona, it's an appealing vision, one that paints Trump as the man who can negotiate even with the clouds. Yet, across the border, Canadians see something different, a warning sign of the resource wars to come. Because in a world where oil pipelines once defined power, tomorrow's battles may be fought over freshwater. Environmental scholars call it the blue gold era, an age when nations will guard rivers and aquifers as fiercely as they once protected gold mines. Already, conflicts over water are intensifying across Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. The US-Canada tension is just the beginning of a new global narrative where geography, not ideology, decides who thrives and who thirsts. And this is where Mark Carney's quiet defiance becomes symbolic. Known globally for stabilizing economies, Carney now finds himself defending something far less abstract, a natural birthright. In his view, Canada's strength in the 21st century will not come from selling what it has, but from protecting it. "True prosperity," he once said, "depends on what we choose not to consume." That philosophy stands in stark contrast to Trump's transactional worldview. For Trump, everything is negotiable. For Carney, some things aren't. Still, time might prove that both men, in their own ways, are responding to the same crisis, a future where the world must rethink what abundance means. Because as the climate warms, every drop counts. Even within Canada, water management is becoming more political. Provinces are fighting over river rights, Indigenous communities are demanding access to clean water, and corporations are lobbying for bottling permits. The debate over Trump's comments exposed how fragile the illusion of abundance really is. In the meantime, Canada is doubling down on conservation. Billions are being poured into water security projects, wetland restoration, and advanced recycling systems. The message is clear: Canada wants to keep its water cycle self-sustaining, not exported. The bigger question, however, is philosophical. Should water ever be treated like oil or gas? Should it be something that can be bought, moved, or traded? Or is it a universal right that belongs to the people who live above it? As drought lines spread across North American maps, those questions are no longer theoretical. They're political, economic, and moral. Trump, in his relentless push to appear decisive, has turned water into a geopolitical weapon, an issue that will define his campaign's climate stance. Carney, by holding firm, has transformed a quiet environmental issue into a national cause. Two men, two visions, and one shared reality. The continent is drying up. As the cameras fade and the speeches end, one thing remains certain. This is no longer a debate about politics. It's a debate about survival, and about whether nations can find common ground before the ground itself turns to dust. Because in the 21st century, wars may not begin with bullets or borders, but with something as simple and as precious as a drop of water.